On Emmanuel Macron's recent visit to Japan, the French president was gifted with something that Studio Ghibli fans would kill to get their hands on, an original cell from a Ghibli film signed by Hayao Miyazaki himself. Macron was presented with a framed Porco Rosso cell and he looked absolutely delighted, not just with the gift itself, but with the message that came with it. Through a translator, Macron was told that Miyazaki chose Porco Rosso because he's a character who takes an anti-war stance, and that Miyazaki had been impressed with Macron's strong position over Donald Trump's war in Iran, particularly for refusing to get involved in the standoff at the Strait of Hormuz. The gesture no doubt came as a welcome boost to Macron, who took to X soon after receiving his gift to thank Miyazaki. He said, "Porco Rosso opposes the brutality of the world with an irreducible idea of freedom. At a time when we must defend peace, our democracies and freedom, Porco Rosso. Thank you so much, Hayao Miyazaki, for this work, which I receive with deep gratitude." If you're not familiar with Porco Rosso, it's the story of an Italian man named Marco who was a fighter pilot during World War I. He was scarred by the horrors of the war and now works as a freelance bounty hunter pursuing air pirates over the Adriatic Sea. Marco became so disillusioned that he placed a curse on himself and transformed into an anthropomorphic pig, living an isolated island life under the name Porco Rosso, meaning red pig in Italian. When an arrogant American pilot is hired to stop him, Porco is forced to confront painful memories from his past and come to terms with an uncertain future. While it's not outwardly a war movie, deep down Porco Rosso is about resisting fascism through individuality and common sense. It's set in the period between the two world wars when economic strife created a vacuum for fascist leaders to rise up and seize power across Europe. In the film, the fascist regime wants Marco to return to the Italian Air Force so they can use his skills as a pilot to help achieve their goals, but he has zero interest in joining them. Porco Rosso's most iconic line comes when a former friend informs Marco that the regime's secret police are tailing him and that it would be in his best interests to return to the fold.
"Marco, why don't you come back to the Air Force? I've got influence now. I can work something out."
"Thanks for the offer, but I'd rather be a pig than a fascist."
Miyazaki initially set out to make a light-hearted film inspired by his love for aviation, but then war broke out in the region where Porco Rosso is set, and he found himself wanting to add more depth to the story. He said, "I wanted to depict characters who discern that petty matters are insignificant and remain true to themselves, not in the sense of shouldering all the blame when a large-scale war or chaos ensues, or because they are also Italian and thus responsible. As individuals, they need to critically examine these circumstances, abstain from doing what they dislike, and not fall for nationalistic ideologies to the point of becoming victims. The responsibility of one's soul lies with oneself. Porco is this kind of man. This is the attitude I think is essential for living in the present." For me, these words shed a great deal of light on Miyazaki's decision to give Macron a cell from Porco Rosso. As the once unthinkable prospect of a Third World War begins to loom, Miyazaki is showing his support for a leader who is calling for peace. The anime icon is a staunch pacifist, and he was highly critical of the United States the last time it went to war in the Middle East, going as far as refusing to attend the 2003 Academy Awards to accept an Oscar for Spirited Away. So it's no surprise that he's against Trump's war with Iran. The fact that Macron has refused to budge despite pressure from Trump to get involved has clearly impressed Miyazaki, whose admiration for France is well known. The veteran filmmaker was inspired by pioneering French animator Paul Grimaud during his formative years, and he's gone on record saying that his biggest influence was the French aviator and author Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, more commonly known as Saint-Ex. Saint-Ex is best known as the author of the classic children's novella The Little Prince, but Miyazaki was more interested in his memoir Wind, Sand and Stars. This is all about his experiences working for Aéropostale, a pioneering aviation company that delivered mail by air all around the world. He initially worked the route between the south of France and Senegal, and later became the manager of Cape Juby, an isolated airfield in the Sahara Desert. Flying was still pretty dangerous at the time, and on more than one occasion, Saint-Ex had to negotiate with desert tribes after they captured pilots that went down in the dunes. Miyazaki was so inspired by Saint-Ex's story that he actually recreated the route that he used to fly, going all the way to the Sahara to visit Cape Juby in person. I've actually got a full video about Miyazaki's pilgrimage to Cape Juby and how France inspired both him and fellow Ghibli co-founder Isao Takahata if you want to check that out. Suffice to say, both men were big Francophiles during their youth, and Miyazaki clearly still has a soft spot for the country. This feeling is definitely mutual, as Ghibli is very popular in France, as is anime in general. When I first moved to Paris, I was blown away by how much the French love their manga and anime. The biggest Japanese pop culture convention in Europe is held in Paris, but the interest in manga and anime isn't niche here, it's very much mainstream. There are themed restaurants and cafes, regular concerts playing anime music, and anime clothing collabs are very common. Dragon Ball and One Piece are both super popular, and that goes all the way to the top, with Macron himself apparently being a fan of both. He's been known to slip One Piece manga into official photos from his office, and in 2021, One Piece creator Eiichiro Oda sent Macron an insanely cool drawing of Luffy and several other One Piece characters. It was dedicated to him and all the One Piece fans in France, so Miyazaki isn't the first big name from the world of manga and anime to give Macron some signed artwork. The French president actually concluded his recent meeting with Japanese Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi with a Kamehameha, something he's done in public before. Macron attended the Paris Japan Expo in 2025 and he was photographed doing the Kamehameha alongside Kazuhiko Torishima, the former editor of Dragon Ball, and Brigitte Lecordier, the French voice actor for Kid Goku. Macron also met with a team from Konami at the Japan Expo, and this led to him being asked to appear in the Yu-Gi-Oh! World Championship 2025 livestream a few months later. Of course, a lot of people claim that Macron isn't as big a fanboy as he likes to make himself out to be, and that's probably true to a certain extent. But it's easy to forget how young he is compared to many world leaders. A whole generation of French kids were introduced to anime by a children's TV show called Club Dorothée, which brought Dragon Ball Z to France alongside the likes of Sailor Moon, Captain Tsubasa, Saint Seiya, Fist of the North Star, and City Hunter. Macron was 10 years old when Club Dorothée first started airing, so he's part of what's known in France as the Club d'Or generation. It's likely that he grew up watching Dragon Ball Z like many other kids his age, so that goes some way to explaining why he seems to enjoy manga and anime. Even if he does play up to it somewhat, it's certainly a smart tactic, not only in terms of finding common ground with French voters, but also for the purposes of diplomacy. The reaction to Macron's meeting with Takaichi is a stark contrast to the Japanese Prime Minister's recent meeting with Donald Trump, in which the US president reacted to a question from a Japanese journalist about him not informing America's allies that he was going to attack Iran, with a comeback about Pearl Harbor.
Surprise. Who knows better about surprise than Japan? Okay? Why didn't you tell me about Pearl Harbor? Okay? Right? You know.
I honestly wouldn't be surprised if this played a part in Miyazaki's decision to send a gift to Macron and shade Trump at the same time. Miyazaki was a child during World War II, and he witnessed firsthand how devastating it was for the ordinary civilians caught in the crossfire. Seeing Pearl Harbor brought up so casually in a meeting between the leaders of the US and Japan is bound to have troubled Miyazaki, who is a big defender of Japan's pacifist constitution. He may not have openly condemned the US and Israel for attacking Iran and plunging the world into chaos just yet, but it's safe to say that the gift he gave to Macron makes it absolutely clear where he stands on the matter. As always, thank you so much for watching, everyone, and let me know what you think about Miyazaki's gift to Macron in the comments. Am I reading into this too much, or do you agree that this is Miyazaki's way of making his feelings on what's going on in Iran known? Also, I'd love to get your opinions on Porco Rosso as a film. For me, it's the most underrated Ghibli movie, and it definitely deserves a lot more love. The landscapes are a feast for the eyes, the flying sequences are mesmerizing, and the music from Joe Hisaishi is top-notch as always. Cheers guys, I'll catch you in the comments.